Dandelions, they're my favorite flowers in the sunshine or during a shower. Dandelions, they be popping up everywhere. And this here, you know, it's so much fun being around this place because they really do have giant sequoia trees and redwoods planted around here. And they have, I mean, one of every different kind of plants you could see. Now, I even looked in the floras of the Pacific Northwest, and they didn't have any basswood, no native basswood, but this is a basswood. And sometimes on the streets, I think in Portland, you can actually see they have a European Tilia or let's see, where's our French speaker? Tilleul? Tilleul. And that's the linden or basswood. You think, basswood? What's it got to do with a fish? Not much to do with a fish, but it's the bast fiber. You know, there's about 3 kinds of plant-derived fibers, textile fibers. There's some that come from the bark. There's some that are seed hairs, like cotton. And there's some that come from the structure of usually pointed leaves, like the yuccas and the agaves, which produce sisal. And the bast fibers are the inner bark fibers. So, with like on a flax plantation, what they do is they grow the flax and they lay it down, let it rot a little bit till those fibers get loose. And on the basswood, this is one of the most valuable plants in much of the north is the basswood because it has these wonderful fibers. And you can strip that, and then you can strip the outer bark away from the inner, and then you can get actual soft fibers can be used. So also from bigger trees you can get the bark and you can use it as a weaving. A friend of mine was in Russia and he bought me a pair of basswood woven shoes, and not built for comfort. And I don't know if they're built for style either, but I guess what they would use them for is you know, in that cold northern climate, that everything was frozen all the time, and so they would just wear lots of layers of wool and then slide one of those basswood slippers over top of it all, and that would protect the wool from wearing out from walking. But anyhow, it has lots of good fibers in the bark. And it could be used, like on this basket here. The lashing is actually a hickory bark, which is another tree that has a useful bast fiber in it. And it kind of reminds me of a story an old timer was telling me about some of these kind of trees. This old mountain guy was saying, yeah, my wife's people, they used to run their dogs up in the mountain. They'd be chasing coons, whatever else them dogs would chase, and them dogs got on the trail of a bobcat. And they started running that bobcat all over that mountain. And eventually the bobcat ended up bayed up against a rock wall, and that pack of dogs was facing any critters being chased by a dog wants to get its back covered, because that way it can face up to the dogs. And that's what that cat was doing, because a pack of dogs will try to surround it. And that cat was back there fighting off this pack of dogs, and I guess one of those dogs got brave, leapt up onto that cat. And have you ever played with a house cat? You know how when you play with them, sometimes they roll over on their back and they start going like this, and whoops, and it's time to ease up on little Puff, you know, and that's the last defense that a cat will have during a time of stress, and that, you know, they're just playing with you, but that's kind of their instinct. And I guess what happened is that dog leapt up onto that cat rolled over and raked with those long hind claws. By the time those fellas got up to the dogs, and where the dogs are barking and everything, the whole pack is running around all disoriented. The cat was gone, and that one dog was laying there with his belly cut open, guts spilled out in the leaves. Well, buddy, they knew what to do. You know what they did? They went over, got them a little hickory tree, could have been a basswood tree, and they pulled some of that bark, got some of those strips of bark off there, and they stripped the outer bark away from it, took their pocket knives, they punched holes at the edge of that dog's belly, and they put his guts back in, sewed that dog up with hickory bark, and buddy, that dog lived. And that story is told as true. And, you know, I wasn't there. I don't know if it was true. You know, at some level, I don't care if it's true. But what that's talking about is fluidity with the environment. you know, something we're all trying to realize. You need something to tie something up with, you know what trees to go, you get you some bark, and that's sort of what we're dealing with here, you know. And the basswood later on, it produces these beautiful little clusters of flowers. They're loaded with nectar and produces lots of nectar for the bees. People around urban areas in the Northwest that have bees can often get a little crop of basswood honey or of linden honey. And in France, they use it as one of the favorite teas, isn't it? And they even have linden festivals, I've heard some stories about. And
Aphids like my linden tree.
aphids like your linden trees. Well, there you go. Well, aphids really suck, man. Right? And they put that little beak in there, and they just drink that tree sap, and then they excrete that honeydew, and then the bees will sometimes come and get the honeydew. Sometimes you'll see a bunch of aphids on the end of a plant, and you'll see these ants walking around. The ants are really herders. And they're actually taking care of these things, and they kind of tickle them, and they excrete the honeydew, and they get paid for, you know, in the same way we would milk cattle, you know. So it's just kind of amazing. So that's, anyhow, the basswood tree. In areas where the basswood trees grow native, they're the favorite food of the porcupines in the spring. And they just love to come out on these branches and walk out there and get those new leaves. And I've eaten those leaves. And I even talked to some permaculturists in the East that say, you might not have to plant lettuce if you just had a hedge of basswood, and you could eat those young leaves in the spring of the year. And somehow, I don't know if you'd quite get the quantity off a hedge of that, but maybe you could if it was a big enough hedge. But this is the basswood. All right. Dandelions, they're my favorite flowers in the sunshine or during a shower. Dandelions, they be popping up everywhere.